Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. You are awesome. I have a news flash for you, and that is that you are awesome. You are doing some self-improvement. That's what this is all about. Yes, this is the weekly live stream where we talk about how to get hired, hence the name, How to Get Hired. And this is episode number, what are we talking about here? Episode 124. This is called Tell Me About Yourself. Nail this interview question every time. So we're going to start off talking about that. But this is primarily a Q&A. So if you are struggling with job search, careers, that kind of stuff, job interviews, resumes, networking, all that kind of stuff, you've come to the right place. You should see a chat box somewhere nearby, the vicinity of my face. So if you are wondering about something, struggling with something, and you are a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, get in the chat and ask your question, and I will do my best to get you the answer you the best way I can. These are always a bit of a gear shift for me, going straight from my regular day job right into a live stream, especially when you get sort of frustrating kind of developments happening right a few seconds before you go on. So we've all got to look past this kind of stuff. That's just what life is like, right? But it's okay. Right on. People are in the chat. David is here. David says hello. Sweet Bad Boy is here. Sweet Bad Boy 12 is here. Says, for Tell Me About Yourself question, do you use any format to answer to the question? Don't you are always remember it? Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what I recommend for that. Listen, the problem with this question is that A, it's a stupid question. B, it's a total cliche. C, everyone and their brother and their brother's dog and their brother's dog's fleas have their own opinion about how to answer this question. And everything works some of the time. That's just the reality. So, you know, somebody, when I give an answer, what I usually get back is somebody commenting saying, well, I told them to F off and I got the job. So, you know, and then the implication that thus that is what you should say. Okay, congratulations if that's what you've done, but that's not what I would recommend. What I recommend is, first of all, I'll just set this up. When you go to a job interview, usually, a job interview being the most artificial encounter in all of business, usually what recruiters are taught, because a lot of them don't have the personality to be able to come up with this on their own, they're taught that you have to have some kind of an icebreaker question or conversation that kicks off the interview, right? So this is the most basic form of that imaginable, where they say, so, tell me about yourself, right? It's also very confusing to a lot of job seekers, especially technically minded, introverted candidates, because this is so general, right? I mean, you could list your food dislikes, you could talk about your blood type, you could talk about, your ambitions, you could talk about your family, you could talk about your political views. I mean, they would all be technically an answer to this, right? But that's obviously not what the recruiter is trying to shoot for when they ask you this question, right? The key thing here is context, right? So even though if they say, tell me about yourself, and you say, well, here's a list of my health issues, right? That is technically an answer to the question. That's not the type of answer they're looking for in this context, right? So they're looking for something that's relevant to a job interview. And they're just meeting you. They're obviously trying to assess your worthiness as a candidate for this. And so anything that comes out of your mouth has to speak to that. And then secondly, the only other thing I'm going to say to set this up is that the context is also that you don't just want to talk about something relevant to getting the job. You also want to say something in your favor, right? So you could tell them about you and you could be honest, but if you give them all the bad stuff about you or things that sound really weird, it's probably not going to help your case. So you want to remember those two things to set this up. Number one, you're here for a job interview, so you need to answer in the context of that, right? So food dislikes, blood type, political views, those sort of things, obviously that's not what you say here. Secondly, like it or not, realize it or not, you're engaged in the sales process. You're selling yourself. You're making a sales pitch for yourself, because these people are talking to several other candidates. They're not just talking to you. They're talking to several people, and they're going to make a judgment about you. And right now, when you first walk into the room, assuming this is your first interview with these people, you're also engaged in making a first impression. Your first impression starts from what they see of you, right? Your attire, your clothes, right? Your grooming, okay? Your body language. And then the first things that come out of your mouth are going to also create that first impression, okay? And, first impressions do matter, right? If you walk in there and you convince them that you're really not the person, it's going to be hard changing their minds, right? If you walk in there and how you look, how you sound, what you say kind of convinces them, hey, this might be the person, then all you have to do then is not put your foot in your mouth and not talk yourself out of a job, right? So that's what's actually going on as the context to this, okay? Let's get into how to answer it. This is what I recommend. Okay. I recommend you don't have to. I'm not one of those people that's going to tell you, like, here, just memorize these 3 paragraphs and say that exactly. I don't do that. It's a 3-part answer. The first part of the answer is optional, but this is how it goes. You say, well, as you can see from my resume. Okay, that's the first part you remember. Well, as you can see from my resume. And then the second part is you summarize your resume in a minute or less. Okay, I would say maybe 45 seconds if you can. A very high-level summary of your resume. So you start with your education. I have this degree. I got this training. And then you give a summary of your work history, starting with your oldest material and then coming up to your most recent material. So your current job or your most recent job. So I started off here 5 years ago. I was in this role with this company. I did this. Then I moved into this role with this other company where I am now. And this is what I do for them, right? So you try and give that high-level summary of your resume in about 45 seconds. The reason why you don't want to go on for 10 minutes is because this is an icebreaker. And quite frankly, what you did with some other company is irrelevant to this job. You might have achieved world peace with some other company, but it doesn't matter if they're trying to hire you to flip burgers. You need to speak to how you're awesome at flipping burgers, right? So this is just an icebreaker. We want to get off this question quickly without taking up the whole interview, and then get to more relevant stuff where you tell them why you're the person that they're looking for, okay? So 45 seconds, summarize your resume, and then you end with, and that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. I'll repeat that. And that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. Okay, so it's a 3-part answer. What was the first part? Well, as you can see from my resume. 2, summarize your resume in 45 seconds. Education, then experience, oldest to newest. And then you end with, and that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity. The reason why you say that last part is because you're not here to talk about something you did with another company. You're here to talk about this job and how you have all the things that they're looking for this job. Okay? When job interviews end up being about something you did with another company or another employer like 10 years ago, it's usually the kiss of death. They might ask you a bunch of questions about it. You spend your whole time talking about that, and then whoops, the interview's over, and you never even mention that you have all the stuff they're looking for and that you're passionate about doing this job, right? Okay, now that I've given you my recommended answer, I got to say a couple of things. Number 1, the first part is optional. You don't have to say that. You don't have to say necessarily, well, as you can see from my resume, and then you go into your resume. you can omit that first sentence. It's more of a memory jog for you to remember what to say than it is really helpful for them. And if you if you don't get the body language and the intonation properly, it can come across really arrogant too, depending on how you say it. So you got to be careful if you're going to say it. You don't say, well, as you can see from my resume, like this, implying that they should have read your resume and stopped wasting your time by asking you about it, Okay. That's how I recommend you answer this question. There's a whole big discussion about why I say to do this, but let's get to your questions first. How do you say that? Jonathan says, hi, how important it is to talk about hobbies and other stuff regarding this question? In my opinion, it's completely unimportant. It's not what you should be doing unless they're hiring you to do those hobbies. It's irrelevant. David says, as long as it's relevant to the job you're applying for. Yes. I had an interview yesterday and didn't do so well. I'm sorry to hear that. Regardless, I passed the interview. Okay. My question for you is, can I still negotiate my salary even though I bombed the interview? You can, yeah, of course you can. Why wouldn't you? You can say anything you want to these people. They have the perfect right to say no to you, and you'll never know what their side of the story is. It might have been a foregone conclusion it was a no, or it could have been a no based on what you said about your salary. But you can do whatever you like, and it's not stupid. The only thing is that, David, what you need to understand is that it's just a very bad idea to bring up salary or compensation until they've given you an offer. Because, how can I put this? For those of you that have never been on the other side of the table and you don't understand how hiring managers and recruiters think of it this way. You go to a store, right? And you're looking at the products. And usually you have some choice. Let's say you need to buy a toaster. Okay. So you go to your friendly neighborhood toaster store and you look on the shelf of all the different types of toasters they have, different brands from different companies. And, some will be cheap, some will be expensive, some will have all kinds of features, some will be pretty basic, right? Okay. So let's say you know nothing about toasters, but you need to buy a toaster, okay, because you're just broke. So you go to the store, you look at toasters. What's the first thing you do? You look at kind of the prices, right, that we're talking about, not knowing much about toasters. Now, this one here is $10. This one here is $250. This one here is $30. That one there is $50, right? Now, you've got to narrow this down because you're going to walk out of there with one toaster, if that. You're not going to walk out of there with 6 toasters. So how do you start eliminating toasters? Usually what people do is they look at the price and you'll eliminate the $250 toaster first, simply based on the fact that it's $250, right? This one here is $10. That one there's $250. Do I really need the $250 one? Probably not. Especially when there's like one that's $30, one that's $50, right? So in an effort to narrow this down, the first thing I look is at his price. So I'm going to narrow it down. I'm going to eliminate the one that's $250, right? That's exactly what's going on when you're in a job interview, when they're talking to other candidates during that round of interviews, right? And they want you to disclose what your salary expectations are, right? And what they're going to do, the only reason they do it is not to have a serious discussion with you about salary. They want to, the only reason they're bringing it up is because they want to eliminate, people based on that. So one person says, I'm happy with minimum wage. The next person says, minimum wage plus $1 is fine. The third one says, I need $250,000 a year and a company car. So what do? You eliminate the one that gave the high number, right? That's the reason they do that. The only time you can negotiate salary and have it be meaningful and actually get anywhere is once they've finally decided that you're the one that they want and they've made you an offer, okay? Now, if they're expecting you to sign the offer and return it. Now, if you delay, that causes them pain, right? And the other thing is that the hiring manager at that point has already sort of resigned themselves to you being the one they hire. They're expecting you. So if you're putting up a bit of resistance, you're like, well, I'll sign it, but I kind of need this. There's a strong temptation for them to just give you that thing so they can get on with this. It can be done and you can start, right? Which is what they want. And if you back out at that stage, it's a lot more painful for them. Now they have to rescind the offer. They have to, the simplest possible thing for them is to go back to a second candidate and make them an offer. So now they've got to create a whole new offer. They've got to revise what they're going to pay that person, what they're going to offer, and all this kind of stuff. That's yet more work for them. They want to avoid that. So that's why you negotiate salary during the offer stage and not before the offer stage. Before you get an offer, when they're not sold on you yet necessarily, your entire strategy around discussing compensation is based around avoiding that discussion, not giving them your position. Ahmed says, how can I get better success with the indirect method? Even when people agree to call, they end up ghosting. What, with reference to what? Indirect method to reference for what? Are we talking about networking? Are we talking about, tell me about yourself? What's the, if you could help me understand, Ahmed, I'll be happy to answer. Okay, so I just wanted to finish up with tell me about yourself. Okay, so for tell me about yourself, it's an icebreaker question. You want to make a good impression. You want to give them relevant things. And the other thing that's going on with tell me about yourself is that, you see, you really don't know what these people are looking for. They have disclosed some of the things that they're looking for in the job posting. Usually it'll say like requirements, and then they'll say, okay, we're looking for someone with this education, this experience, these skills, this personality trait, whatever, right? So that's a subset of what they're looking for, right? That's the criteria they've disclosed. There's also a hidden elimination criteria. There's also other things they're looking for too that they haven't explicitly stated, and that's usually intentional. Okay, they're looking for other things, but they intentionally haven't disclosed what they are, because the main reason is that if they advertise this is what we're looking for, then every candidate that applies would say, oh, I've got that. That's me. That's totally me, right? When it isn't, right? So it's for that reason that they hold stuff back, right? Now, this makes it tricky during job interviews, because if you go off script and you start giving them all this information about different things, someone was asking about hobbies, someone was asking about other things. Unbeknownst to you, you can eliminate yourself because you mentioned something that they really don't like for some reason, right? This happens all the time. So that's why it's kind of dangerous to go off script. It's dangerous to talk about your ambitions, your personality, all this kind of stuff, because it doesn't really do you that good necessarily, but you can risk bumping up into things that they don't like. And I did a video on this several years ago, and I famously talked about an interview that I had sat in at the time, where the hiring manager, in that case, they were a big sports fan, and they eliminated the candidate because the candidate went off talking about what they do for fun. And they said, oh, I went to this sports event. And the hiring manager said, oh, what sports event? And they said, oh, it was this sports event, and I was rooting for this team. And what the candidate was unaware of, was ignorant of, is that the hiring manager was a raging, rabid fan of the opposing team. So that was a deal breaker for the hiring manager. He said, no, it's not going to work out if I know you're a super fan of the team I hate. So that was basically the kiss of death for that candidate. Now it's stupid, and the candidate wouldn't have probably been able to figure this out, but that's what's going on. So the more you go off script and reveal all kinds of things about yourself that, it's not really necessary, you risk that happening. So everything about you that's really relevant, apart from your ambition, is on your resume. Your experience, your education, stuff like that. The only thing that's really not on there is your ambition and your personality. Now, your personality, they can see that, right, by talking to you. That's half the point of a job interview. The other thing, your ambition, they probe that stuff by asking you that other cliched, stupid job interview question: where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? That's supposed to probe for what your ambitions are. So anyway, there's a lot to this question. I mean, everybody and their brother's got a method to answer it. Now, here's kind of the kicker, okay? When you applied for this job, you sent in a job application, and usually that included your resume, right? Now, what they did was they saw your application, and based on it, they brought you in for an interview. So what that suggests is that all the material that was in your job application is safe. Nothing in there got you eliminated, right? So your resume is safe. Your resume doesn't contain any material that, unbeknownst to you, they've got a problem with, and they would eliminate you for it, right? They saw your resume. They said, okay, it looks good. Let's move them on to the next stage, right? So in the job interview, if you don't know, like, it's an open-ended question and you don't want to say something where you eliminate yourself by saying some random thing like your hobbies, if you stick to the material on your resume in situations like that, you're not going to eliminate yourself, because the presumption is that everything on your resume is safe because they saw it first, then they brought you in for an interview, right? So that's the advantage of using this method. You could say anything under the sun to this question. You could talk about stuff not on your resume. You could talk about stuff on your resume. I would stick to stuff on your resume. Besides, what usually happens in a job interview, and this is the last thing I'm going to say before I get back to questions, what usually happens in a job interview is that a lot of recruiters, especially, they schedule job interviews sort of back to back, right? And what that means in the real world is that you sent in an application, they scheduled an interview, and it's maybe a couple of weeks later at least that they're bringing you in for an interview. So by the time the interview rolls around, they don't remember what was on your resume from weeks ago when they looked at it last, and they haven't had time to refresh themselves right before this job interview, because they had a previous one that just ended, and then this one started, and there was no time to really study up on the next candidate before the interview began. So that's another reason why interviewers love this question, because if you don't know anything about the candidate, you can just ask this question first, and it sort of gets you up to speed. It gets you familiar with the candidate, and then that frames being able to then ask better questions afterwards, right? So that's the other reason that they ask this. So the stuff that's relevant to you should be stuff that's on your resume anyway. It's your previous experience, your previous education. Like, talking about hobbies, that doesn't really help them if they don't remember who you are and what was on your resume. You tell them all about your hobbies or your political opinions or your family, or your ambitions even. That doesn't really help them set up for the rest of the interview, So that's another reason why I recommend answering the way that I do. Okay, we got a lot of questions here. Let's get to these. Okay, so Tommy Zzz says, what makes employers interview candidates even though they already got a candidate they're moving forwards with already? It pisses me off. Newsflash, I did not get the job because they were worried. Okay, well, there's several reasons. There isn't just one. Listen, sometimes it's just a political kind of thing where it's all just a dog and pony show. They're really wanting to hire that internal candidate, and that's what they're going to do. It's all just for perceptions, for optics. They want it to appear that they're considering outside people when they're really not. So they go through this charade. And unfortunately, you could just be caught in the middle of that. There's absolutely nothing you could have done. It was a no-win situation. So at least, I mean, it's not a good thing, and you're right to be pissed off if that's what happened. But at least you have the satisfaction of knowing that there was nothing you could have done. It's not like you screwed up in any way. You know what I mean? Other times they're open. They're genuinely open. They don't know if they should get an external candidate or an internal candidate. The advantage with an internal candidate is that they're less of a risk, and you know what you're getting because they've already proven themselves. They're already a known quantity. You know exactly who you're getting, and you're familiar with them. The disadvantage of an internal candidate, there's two disadvantages. Number one is that if you move an internal candidate into this role, you've just created another vacancy, their old job. So you fill one job, but you create another job that has to be filled. So you're like no further along. So you need to then do another job search to replace that person. So it doesn't, like, it means more work, right? So people don't like it for that reason. The other reason is that an internal candidate, you're not going to get change when you hire an internal candidate. Sometimes people want change. Things are not going well. We need new blood. We need new ideas. And getting people that are stuck in this organization doing things this way, that's not what we need, right? Sometimes we don't want change. When things are working really well, all we want is the status quo. You get an internal candidate. They won't rock the boat. It'll be just more of the same, right? So there's a couple of different dimensions to this. But it sucks if you were in that situation. It's those kind of charades that, like in the private sector, I'm glad I didn't have to play any of those kind of games. People in government and stuff and government related things, that they have to play all these kind of games because they take money from the government. They're funded by the government, so they have to do what the government says, including some of this stuff. Ahmed says reference to networking. Sorry. Okay, so the indirect method. Okay, so that's more when you do like informational interviews and stuff like that. So what was your question? How can I get better success with the indirect method? Well, I don't know what you've done. Even when people agree to a call, they end up ghosting. Well, okay. Well, the way I recommend is not over phone calls necessarily. It's in person, right? So, I mean, I don't know what you've done. You're saying, what can I do better? Well, I don't know what you've done. Indirect method is informational interviews. So bone up on informational interviews. The way you would get an informational interview has nothing to do with the job. If people suspect you're trying to sell them something or you're trying to hit them up for a job, like to hire them, they're not going to want to do it because that's not what it's for. It's for information. If you say, like, for example, in an extreme case, like you're a student at school, you're taking a degree in archaeology, and then you contact someone who's maybe a professor of archaeology, and you say, like, would I be able to speak with you, ask you a few questions about archaeology and where it's going and, what the future holds for archaeologists? I'd love to get your opinion on that. I'm a student. I'm looking to become an archaeologist, but I'm just looking to get some feedback from people who are actually in that profession. Would that be okay? And the idea is that you send that out as a message. Some people will say yes, some people will say no. A lot of people won't respond. So the idea is you would want to go down and talk to them in person. Phone calls, they're of limited use, but you want to do this in person because, number one, it's so much more effective. You'll be able to talk to them for a hell of a lot longer if it's in person, and they'll like you a lot more, and they'll want to talk to you more. And after you have the informational interview, they will, you can say, like, if ever I have any more questions in the future, would I be able to give you a call? Would that be okay? 95% of the time they'll say, sure, yeah, not a problem. So you've got a connection in the industry, right? So that's like informational interviews. They should be done in person if at all possible. So Ahmed says, so in my situation, I'm in Montreal and I'm trying to connect with people in Luxembourg. So I'm trying to connect with people in finance over there to do a move. Okay. Yeah, well, obviously you can't do it in person. I mean, if you can do like at the very least, do some kind of Zoom call or something, um, you know, because when people can see you, first of all, you have to have a real time exchange. But when they can see you, you become a lot more real to them. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but it's how human psychology works. Like the person is a real person when you can see them and stuff. Now, just so you know, I mean, I'm not an expert at like emigration or work visas or anything like that. Like, so if it's that type of situation, I'd recommend that you primarily get some resources from people that can help you with that aspect of it, right? If you just want to learn about finance and you're in Montreal, there's many people in finance in Montreal that you can have informational interviews with. You know what I mean? You don't have to go halfway around the world. But if you need to talk to someone in Luxembourg because you're hoping to emigrate to Luxembourg, I would primarily talk to someone who understands emigrating from Canada to Luxembourg, you know what I mean? And what's involved in that. They might be able to give you some pointers about how to secure employment in advance and all the details of how that works. Okay, so where did I leave off here? Tell me. Worried about my commute time. So this was, they're moving forward, pissed me off. Okay, I don't see how the commute time is related to the last thing you said. I don't know if it was meant to be, but Alex Kwok says, "What's up, Bill? How you doing?" I'm doing fine. I got a bit of frustrating news right before my live stream began, but I'm going to look forward to dealing with that as soon as I'm off the air. But apart from that, I'm doing really good, actually. It's all good. Tommy said, "They said it was a tough decision to make, so I went to the interview on a false hope." Well, listen, Tommy, you never really know what's up with these people. You never know what's going on the other end. I totally get that it's not helpful for someone to just say, "Don't worry about it." I totally get that. But listen, just the reality is that, this game is about getting leads and pursuing leads. And the more leads you pursue, the more bites you get, the more interviews you go to, the more networking opportunities you do, the more jobs you apply to, like the more leads and opportunities you pursue, the sooner you're going to get hired, the sooner one of them is going to come through. Okay. And in order to get to a yes, everybody has to go through multiple no's, and some of them can be really damn devastating. There's just no easy way to rationalize it. It's just tough. It's demoralizing. Rejection is never easy, especially for people that don't deal with rejection as part of their profession. Like if you were in sales or something, you would probably understand this, because sales is all about rejection. It's a numbers game. Most people say no. It doesn't matter if you're trying to sell them like the most successful product in the world, you still get more no's than yeses. That's just how it goes, And a lot of the time, what's going on with the other party behind the scenes, first of all, you have no control over that. Secondly, once you do start to see like what people are doing, you realize it's not about you, like in your performance. It's not like you screwed up. It's just about like walking into essentially a no-win situation. If you're an introvert and you go to a job interview and the hiring manager just doesn't like introverts, hey, it's like it's a no-win situation. They didn't know you were an introvert before you showed up, and there's not much you can do about being an introvert. That's just who you are. You know what I mean? So you just got to go through it. The next job interview you get, they love introverts. They think, you're awesome when they meet you. The person says like, "Wow, you seem like a really down-to-earth type person. You're not trying to talk my ear off about trivia. You're not trying to, you're not being exhausting with too much talk. What you say is straight to the point. and I just get your vibe, and you're the person I'd rather work with. You know what I mean? So it's just a matter of rolling that dice enough times till it gets like the jackpot, basically. It's nice to see you too again, Alex, or meet you again. Thanks for being here. I'll do my best to answer any question you got. Wow, that's some pretty high praise too. Tell me, so that's dumb of the recruiter. Oh, I don't even know what you're referring to, but there's so many things to pick from. Joshua says you were in a company when you applied to another job. At the time of your intro interview, your position in the company got affected by a company-wide layoff with severance. When can you disclose it? Do you need to disclose it? I wouldn't disclose it unless they've asked. I mean, you haven't lied about anything. You've stated your situation truthfully when it came up at the beginning of the process. If they ask you again, you can certainly update them, but I wouldn't go out of your way to by the way, I just think you should know that since we started this process, I've been laid off. Like maybe I'm missing something, but it doesn't really seem like you need to do that. So I wouldn't. That's just introducing yet another element in there that could. You never know. Either it's neutral and they don't care, or they could look about it unfavorably, right? I don't think they're going to look at it and think it's favorable, Or if they do, it's for the wrong reasons, that you don't want to disclose, right? So, I just keep that under your hat. Now, if they directly ask you for it, where you have to reveal that, you know what I mean? Like, for example, if you get to the point where they're going to check references and they want to check your current employer, either you can give them your current employer, or even then, I think, most people, what they do is they don't give their current employer because they're like, look, the implication is that I don't want my current employer to know that I'm interviewing with other companies, so you don't have my permission to contact my current boss. I mean, hopefully that should make sense. And it should, because they deal with that like all the time, right? So you still don't need to disclose it as far as I could see. Ahmet says, so in my situation, I'm in Montreal and I'm trying to connect with people in Luxembourg, so I'm trying to connect with people in finance over there to do a move. Yeah, okay, well, listen, like moving to Luxembourg is not my core competency. I can't advise you about that. So you need to talk to someone who can help you with that aspect of it. Arthur says, any questions for us? How do you go about this? When they ask you that at the end of the job interview, that's actually pretty simple. You should ask, a good rule of thumb is to ask 3 questions. And the last one should be, where do we go from here? So you understand what the next step in the process is. Should you be checking back on a website? Are they going to tell you? When are they going to tell you? This kind of stuff, right? It usually helps to always be that the last question that comes out of your mouth before shaking someone's hand and walking out the room. The other 2 questions, I mean, there's so many to choose from. You could talk about like challenges. What do you see the biggest challenge being for the person in this role? What do you see the biggest challenge for this company going forward? What do you see the biggest challenge for this industry going forward? Right? Those are good. You could talk about the origin of this job. Is this a new position, or did someone retire, or what's the reason for this vacancy? Right? That's another one. You can do more sophisticated things. Like one that I really like, especially if the interview has gone well, is to say, have you seen anything in other candidates that you haven't yet seen in me that I could perhaps speak to? So it gives you that one last chance before the interview's over for you to make your case. If they're getting the impression of you that, you have a weak spot or something, or they haven't really heard anything they were looking for, like about this or about that, this is your last chance. And they say, well, we haven't really heard a lot of this. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's great that I asked, because actually it turns out that I do have that. I have several examples of that. I did that here, I did that here, I did that here. And, if you have any questions about the nature of that work, fire away. That's a good one. There's a whole bunch there that you can choose from. Lots of people have done videos about that, including me, all the different questions that there are about this kind of stuff. So that should do you pretty good. Just starting with that stuff. Ahmed, Zoom was always the goal, but no success till now. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Slav says today he's not grumpy. Are you talking about me? Am I ever grumpy? Your best friend says how to react to discrimination interview results. I don't know that you can. I mean, are you going to change their mind about it or something? I'm not sure. There's a difference between what might feel good and what's actually effective. Like, if you feel that they're biased or something, or they've got something wrong, sure, by all means, get up and tell them they're idiots and tell them that they've got you all wrong. And that, that's not going to help your case, and it's going to create a bunch of awkwardness. So, the other aspect of that, though, of course, is that, a lot of people, they see discrimination or bias when there actually isn't any. It's understandable sometimes, but it's like just not being chosen doesn't necessarily mean there was bias or discrimination. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. In every job posting, you get hundreds of candidates. If it's a posted job, that means you get one person that gets hired. You get hundreds that are not, right? So does that mean that there was bias in all of those? Like illegal bias? Anyway, that's like a whole topic. It tends to get very political, so I steer clear of it. But, I don't know that you can, if it's an insulting remark, then that's something else. But if you just perceive what you see as like someone's got an opinion on this and you don't agree with it, I don't know you would necessarily have to react to that, in my opinion. Others may use different approaches. That's just what I think. Tommy says, yes, I agree, pursuing leads. Absolutely. The more leads you pursue, the quicker this goes. And then the more quality, the more prepared you are, and, the more research you do and the more thought you give to this stuff, the better you do. Beefy Buttercup says, what are your weaknesses? That's a big, long question to answer. That's the king, like I've talked about this before, that's the king of trick questions, right? So they love, recruiters love questions like these because, especially for young people, or people that haven't done a lot of interviews tend to fall right into these traps, right? Because you see, from the recruiter's perspective, they're starting out with hundreds of candidates. They filter that down to about, I think the average is 6 that you bring in for interviews. And then from there, you bring it down, you filter it down to 1, and you offer the job to that person, right? So it's a process of elimination. So what recruiters love to say about this question, if you ask a recruiter in general about like how to answer this question, what I've heard is recruiters will say, oh, we just want to know that you're self-aware enough about your own weaknesses and have identified them and are working on them, right? That's all we want to know, and I call BS on that, because what happens in the real world is they are talking to 6 people that they don't know, that they're just meeting. They've got to eliminate 5 of the 6. What we see a lot of times is they'll ask this question or questions like this one. They'll say, what's your weakness? And the person goes, oh, well, listen, I've got a rotten temper. I don't work with young people. I hate young people. I'm not a morning person, so I'm often late for work, but it's okay because I do good work. And, and I'm an alcoholic, so it's like, they go, oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you telling us that. And then they eliminate you, right? So you fell right into the trap, right? You're in this mode where you assume they're the authority figure, and you've been conditioned to answer questions freely and completely when an authority figure asks you a question, especially in a job interview. And I still get stupid comments from people saying, oh, well, in my country, we are told we have to answer these questions, so we just do. So that's how it works in this country. It's like, no, it doesn't. It might work that way in what you've seen, sure, but that's not how it works in that country. You know what I mean? It's a very sort of amateur level question where you can entrap people with this. It's a great way to discover instantly exactly what the red flags might be with that candidate without even having to get to know them. So you just eliminate them based on what they say. And the stupid thing is that the candidate that doesn't give real weaknesses in response to this question is the one that tends to win out, right? So the way to answer that question is, when they say, what are your weaknesses? There's sophisticated answers to it, but you just don't give real weaknesses. You can't say, I think I have like a 15-minute video on this, right, where I went into all the reasoning behind it and stuff and exactly what to say. Check out that video. I'm not going to spend 15 minutes on it now, but if you really want to get into it. Joshua says, also, does a company-wide layoff with severance affect you in any way on your next role or interview? No. Are you talking with that company? Like, if you want to go back to that company, then it might. It's obviously part of your history with them. But to any other employer, it shouldn't. It doesn't come up, First of all, it's entirely voluntary if you want to disclose that, right? To my knowledge, to this day, in no country that I know of, is there a central database where they can look up stuff like the reason for your dismissal, your termination from any other company, without you giving them permission to do that, right? Now, sometimes companies within a certain industry, they will share information. And this is very much frowned upon, if not outright illegal. And there's been some of that in the US, particularly in the tech industry, that's been going on for about 20, 30 years. Usually centered around Apple was the big violator for that. But there's no central database that they can find. So it's all based on what you disclose. So they'll say anything that they need to say to put pressure on you to get you to voluntarily disclose stuff like this. They'll say, like, oh, our process is that you have to disclose this and then blah, blah. It's like, yeah, okay. That's great. But my process is I disclose what I want to disclose, right? So that doesn't affect anything. So don't worry about it. Especially if you're terminated without cause, like if it's just a layoff, that doesn't affect anything. There's absolutely no harm in even disclosing in a job interview. If they ask you, why did you leave your previous job? There's absolutely no harm in disclosing I was laid off. And if you were laid off in a mass layoff where it wasn't just you let go, it was like lots of other people all let go together, right? All laid off together, then if you say that provides even more weight to the fact that it's no reflection on your suitability or your quality as an employee, So yeah, no effect. Pius says, do I need to tailor my resume according to every job? Yes. Yes, you do. Well, look, you can do what you want, right? But it will be so much harder to get an interview if you don't tailor your resume. You're in control of you. You don't have to listen to me or anyone else, but the reality is that, especially in the last 5-10 years, that's really come in. And it's come in because at least the posted jobs are getting so many applications that they can afford to be really choosy when they call in people for an interview, right? So in order to be one of those people selected, you have to be a very close match. You have to use their lingo. You have to speak prominently about the things they said they're looking for, right? So you need to tailor the resume. Your chances of getting an interview will go way up. And that's the reason why a lot of people are using AI. They're using all kinds of AI tools. I still like plain old vanilla Chat GPT. I think that's a pretty damn good option to tailor your resume or your cover letter. You can do it very quickly if you know what to do. You let it do the heavy lifting, but you're the one in charge of the process. Arthur says, do I need to put all the places I have worked if they do not apply to the role being applied for? No, not necessarily. You can leave stuff out for the sake of having a relevant resume, especially places that you didn't work very long, right? If there's places that you worked at for a long time and it's within the last 10 years, what I would try and do is I try to include them, but I would emphasize the things you've done during that role that relate to the role you're applying for. Okay, so you might have had 50 different duties while working in a job, right? And maybe 3 of them might relate to the job you're applying for right now. So I'd list the job, but I'd focus on those 3 things that are relevant to this job you're applying for. That's why when you tailor your resume, it's going to do this automatically, right? And it's going to leave all the crap off there that's great, but it just serves to dilute, your application. Tommy Zzz says, does cold emailing work when networking as an introvert? I would not do that. Following your method of searching for companies in my area to network my services to them would be calling me better. Would email. Well, I don't recommend either of those. I don't recommend emailing, nor do I recommend calling. So I don't know where you're getting like the whole, like, my method says this, because that's not my method. I don't recommend either of those. I recommend, probably the best thing to do would be LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, there's a variety of different methods to connect, like to send a message to people. There's all kinds of things you can do there, right? So that's what I'd recommend. To know what my method is and for me to walk you through it, that's this course right here. Check that course out. Link in the description. With networking, it's hard to talk about because there's a lot of concepts and you have to be aware of all of them because they all apply simultaneously, right? Like, for example, let me illustrate. You want to go to a job interview, right? It would be like somebody coming onto a chat here and saying, well, I followed your method of job interviews and I didn't get hired. It turns out they showed up naked to the interview, right? Because I never actually said, you've got to wear clothes, right? I just kind of implied, I thought everyone knew that. But if you've never done this before, if you were an alien landing here doing your first job interview, that was never explicitly stated. So you have to lay down all these principles. If it's in public, you must wear clothes. You must also wear appropriate clothes, right? So that's kind of like what teaching networking is like to people that have never done it. You really have to lay down all the principles, because if you're missing a couple, the whole thing doesn't work, that's in my effort to sort of teach younger people this. I've taught this in university, and I've taught this on my YouTube channel, with courses and things, and I occasionally talk about it. That's the real problem, because people are arriving with like zero knowledge, wanting to learn how to do it. You've got to teach them all the principles first, and then once you understand how everything works, then what I recommend actually falls into place, why you would do it that way. Where did we? Okay, so Tommy was a cold emailing thing. Something I else noticed. I got a lead on job yesterday, and once I got the application, it was for a completely different profession. The manager really
though graphic design and media journalism were the same thing. I guess they thought graphic design and media journalism were the same thing. Well, that's not good. I mean, even I know that it's not, and I haven't worked in either of those. Once I told them I studied graphic design and communication, they got correlated that to media journalism. Some recruiters really don't got a clue what they're hiring for. Well, recruiters by definition don't understand the jobs they're recruiting for because they went to school to learn HR. So if they're posting a job for a graphic designer, they don't know anything about graphic design. They know HR. They know employment standards, labor laws, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the thing with recruiters. It would be the hiring manager that would understand graphic design if they're looking for a graphic designer. Because if you get the graphic designer job, the hiring manager will be your boss. And presumably they know what graphic design is. Maybe they're a graphic designer themselves. But yeah, you're not the first person to notice that recruiters don't understand the nature of the jobs they're applying for or they're recruiting for. Sin Cost 6 says, I got a job offer and the salary was way above my expectations and even the range I gave them initially. My girlfriends, so like you've got multiple girlfriends, says I should try to negotiate it even further. What do you think? It's up to you. Like, whenever you try and negotiate, there's a certain amount of risk. There's a risk that they can say no, and then you lose the whole thing. So if it's already like above your expectations, you might want to quit when you're ahead, Now, if this is their opening offer, it's not a stupid suggestion to say that if you try and push for a little more, they'll probably say yes, right? That's not stupid, but it does come with a little bit of risk. Now, if you don't want to jeopardize this whole thing and risk them saying no, it might be good to not negotiate since you're already happy with what they're offering, right? Usually it makes more sense to negotiate when like they've given you something, but it's not that good. So it's like, if you try and negotiate and then they say no, it's really not that big of a loss. You know what I mean? But if they're already giving you something that you think is fantastic, you might want to just take it, right? In that situation. It's entirely up to you. It depends what your situation is, and how resilient you are to if they say no. You know what I mean? That's the problem in a bit more perspective, hopefully. What you could do is you could say, listen, employment isn't all just about pay. There's a lot of other dimensions to this. Maybe there's benefits. Maybe there's, sick days. Maybe there's vacation days. Maybe there's perks. Maybe there's, like travel or, privileges like working from home or, you know what I mean? Like maybe they're, like they give you a company car or whatever, so you could say like the salary is fine. The benefits are fine, but I see it's for 2 weeks vacation a year. If you could give, instead of 10 days, if you could make it 13 days, then we got a deal and I will sign and return it to you. Something like that. You can maybe do something like that. There's all kinds of options available to you. Alex A says, I'm sorry I missed the beginning. How is it better to summarize a resume when answering the tell me about yourself question in chronological order or in reverse order? How is it better to summarize a resume when answering? I don't want to rehash that. I just said that. You could always rewind the live stream, and listen to what I said. I already kind of went into that stuff. I don't want to just go into it again. Arthur says, is there a minimum number of questions that can be asked at the end of the interview? What would be the ideal questions to ask? Well, I already talked about that earlier, like 10 minutes ago. I'd say 3 questions are good, typically. I mean, you could do more. It's not an exact science. But 3 is probably, a good rule of thumb. The last question is going to be, where do we go from here? Okay, so that's 2 other questions. Okay. there isn't a minimum or a maximum. It's just the impression you make. It's all based on perceptions, right? 3 is about typical, right? So I don't think anyone's going to find it weird if you ask 3, right? If you say 0, if they say, do you have any questions? And you say, no, I don't, that's going to not be taken very well. That signals a few things. It signals you're not really interested. You don't really care. This isn't important to you, right? So you should ask some questions, and 3 is a good number. Joshua says, could overqualification for a role be a reason your resume might not go through ATS? Job request, bachelor degree in you. Well, overqualification is not a thing. It's a bullshit excuse when they don't want to tell you the real reason why you were rejected. So overqualification is not like a condition. You know, I'm sorry, you're just too good. You're too qualified to do this job. We need someone that can get it wrong and that doesn't know what they're doing. And I'm sorry, you're just not that person. So I'm afraid it's not going to work out. That was said by nobody ever, right? You know, you see and I'm being kind here, the possibly legitimate uses of the word overqualification is to mean we suspect you will want too much money. We don't know that, but we're making an assumption that you will, despite what you say, that you will still want more money than what we're offering you. You know, that's probably the only legitimate use of that word. Everything else is just, it's something that they say instead of what they really want to say, which is either you're too old or, you know, we just don't like you. Okay, so the answer is no. It's not something that ATS can really filter out because it's not a thing. You know, you could like filter out the salary question and say, well, this person, their salary expectations were too high, you know, but that's still not the same as overqualification, right? Beefy Buttercup says, thank you. I'll review your past review. Oh, awesome. That's great. Beefy Buttercup. Good name too. Arthur says, Josh, that was for Joshua. Okay. We've reached the end of the chat. Yeah, check out that course. Where is that? This is a different screen now, so I got to adjust my hand. That course there. That course right there. To learn how to do all this stuff all in one place, including networking. Okay, networking is the big thing. You know, for really young people, for introverted people that don't want to learn anything else, you got posted jobs to apply to. Posted jobs are very, very competitive. Basically, for posted jobs, you need to customize your resume for each job. You can do that these days with AI pretty efficiently, pretty quickly. It does the heavy lifting, right? You coordinate the process and tell it what to do, and then you proofread it, and then you send it on. You know, but 80% of jobs are not posted. So all the jobs that you're seeing that are posted, that's 20% of all the jobs that exist, right? So if you want to put yourself forward for the other 80% of jobs that are not posted, they exist and you can get them. You usually access them through some form of networking. And those jobs, they exist. They're called the hidden job market simply because they're not posted publicly, right? They might be in the public domain. People have told people about it, but they're not like posted publicly on the internet, right? Now, what I'd recommend for everyone here, I don't care if you're just starting out. I don't care if you're a seasoned veteran of this. You know, don't take my word for any of this. Go and do your own research into it, and you'll see that this is indeed the case. And then if you're tired of like this game of applying to posted jobs where they treat you like crap, you got to go through, you usually don't get interviews, and then when you do, they treat you like crap, and you got to deal with idiot recruiters and stuff like this. It's a very demoralizing process. If you're tired of that, I highly recommend that you check out the hidden job market. That's where all the really good jobs are anyway, and that's where there's substantially less competition. Instead of having like 600 people or 800 people apply for them and go head to head, put them all on a level playing field, and you have to try and beat out 600 people or 800 people or whatever it is. You have to beat out maybe 2 other people to go for one of the jobs that isn't posted. So I don't care if you're an extrovert or an introvert. Introverts can kick ass at this. You know, it's how I built my consulting business. You just, reach out. Now, if you want to know what I'm talking about, I did a video that kind of illustrates this a bit more. It's referenced in the description under this live stream. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. So, I mean, I'm not trying to get you to leave, but if you go down in the description box, you'll see I linked to several different things, several resources. One of them is a video called How Successful People Get Jobs. Check out that video. You'll see what I'm talking about. And do your own research on the hidden job market. I have a video that I did years ago called The Hidden Job Market or Hidden Job Market. That's also linked down below. But I strongly encourage you, do your own research on this stuff. Don't listen to advice for absolutely everything. Go and verify it. Verify it yourself. And tune in to the hidden job market. That's a real gold mine for people that are looking for good employment. It means that you have to, if you don't know any networking skills whatsoever, it means you have to learn a couple of basic things. The good news is that a lot of introverts and people like me, technically minded introverts, you can do all of this work from your computer or your phone. You know what I mean? You can set up meetings and interviews and stuff. And the way it works is that people will invite you down. They want to talk to you. It feels like a referral. It does not feel like a job interview. It's a referral. And you talk to the hiring manager one-on-one usually. And you're not forcing yourself on anyone. They want to talk to you based on you reaching out to them. And so anyway, if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you want to also do that as part of your job search campaign, which I highly recommend, learn that stuff. If you want to learn it with me, check out that course because I put all that stuff into that course. That's all my advice, all my learning, all in one place. If you're just starting out, you don't know how any of this stuff works, get that course. That'll help you. That'll set you right on the path. Okay. And all the stuff you got to do, whether it's sort of figuring out who you are. And that can be a challenge for people that have had kind of a career where you've done several things, to setting up your LinkedIn profile, writing your resume, learning how to do a job interview, getting job interviews, passing them, negotiating offers, all that kind of stuff. And then all the networking stuff. All the good jobs are hidden. That's usually the way it works. And like I've said many times before, because they're hidden, because they don't need to post them publicly to get candidates. They're in demand. Those jobs are in demand. The moment you mention it to anyone else, they're like, "Oh, I got a brother or a cousin or a friend or a coworker that would love to do that. Can I tell them to send you their resume?" That's the reaction that people have when they hear that this job is free. Because they're good jobs. That's why they don't need to spend money and time publicizing it. They've already got a lot of people that would want to do it and that are capable of doing it the moment they mention it. That person could be you if you know what to do, if you know how to sort of get in there and state your case, Okay, we got some more people here. Pius says, I am applying for jobs in Indeed, but haven't received any response from any employer. Well, you're not alone, Pius. Make sure that you are customizing your resumes to each job you apply for. Because if you're not, it's going to be very hard to get responses in this day and age. Okay, so learn about how to do that. Learn about using things like ChatGPT to do it for you, essentially. Right? It does the heavy lifting. You don't have to agonize and do it all manually. It can do 95% of the work. Right? But that's how you do it, and that's how you get responses for these things in this day and age. Earlier this year, I collaborated with another YouTuber on this channel, a YouTuber that's a recruiter, and I was talking to them about this because they do recruiting for a lot of companies. And I was saying, what are you seeing out in the job market, with job applicants? Are they using AI tools and stuff and doing this? And they said, well, we're seeing about 50-50. half of people are and half of people aren't. But the ones that are getting hired are the half of people that are using all the AI tools. So that's why you need to start using the AI tools if you're not already doing it, because the candidates who are using those are eating your lunch. They're the ones that are getting hired and getting the interviews. Whereas if you're not using it, you're not getting those interviews or those jobs. So that's the deal. Mode Camran says, is switching jobs frequently hurting my chances of getting hired? It certainly can, but not necessarily. And if you've done that, there are ways where you can like write your resume to kind of minimize that. You know, you leave certain things off and you draw attention to certain other things, right? And so you can get around that to some degree. But generally speaking, yes, if you're leaving a job every 3 months or less, and that just keeps happening like year after year, yes, that'll be a problem. If there's 1 or 2 jobs you've taken that, you know, you left after a couple of months because it didn't work out, that's not the end of the world. But if you are doing that for every job you ever get, then that could be a problem. But once again, the hidden job market is the great equalizer. So I don't care if you've got like, you know, the longest you've been in a job is 6 months. I don't care if you've got a major work gap. I don't care if, you know, you were taking care of a sick family member for 10 years and now you're rejoining the workforce. I don't care if you're changing careers and you have zero experience in the career you're going to. The hidden job market equalizes all of that because you're hired on the basis of who you are and not what your resume says. It's a completely different way of evaluating people, right? Excuse me. Okay, Beefy Buttercup says overqualified candidates might not stick around after you've spent time training, though. Yeah, if they're overqualified, which is not a thing. It's just a euphemism for several other real things. K9 FPV says, hello, I have an interview in 1 hour. And in the invite, they put candidates who ask better questions make a better impression at the end than those who do not. What could I ask? This is the 3rd time today in this stream I've had to answer that question. Ask 3 questions. The last question is going to be, where do we go from here? That's the last thing you say before it ends and you walk out of the room. Previous questions, you could say, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the person in this role? What do you see as the biggest challenge for this industry going forward? What do you see as the biggest challenge for this company going forward? Okay. Why was this position, what led to this position being vacant? Is it a new position or did somebody retire? That sometimes helps. A more sophisticated question would be, like I said earlier, have you seen anything in other candidates that you haven't yet seen in me that I could perhaps speak to? You know, that's last chance to sort of, you know, fill in the gaps of what they were looking for with you before the interview ends. I did a video on this. Go watch a video of mine called, like, you know, how to answer questions at the end of the interview, or what do you have any questions for us? Best answer. You know, go check those out. Okay, but hopefully that helps. And if you need help and you want to learn how to navigate your way through this, check out that course. That's where I put all my advice all in one place. If, on the other hand, you are gainfully employed, but you're looking to climb the ladder, you're wanting to maybe get into management or, you know, get promoted, things like this, that can help you. That's all the communication skills that I tacked on from going from being a supervisor to a CEO throughout my career. This is all the communication skills. So if you want to develop above average communication skills in a work environment, in a professional environment, check that out. That's where I put them all. It's called Write Like a Professional. And yes, it is about writing, but it's more about what you say, what the response is. to things in different situations. So check that out. Okay, it's been an hour and 14 minutes. There's 40 people here. Thank you for being here. I mean, listen, what I want to say is, like we've had several people so far today talking about the rejection. It's painful to get this type of rejection. And the thing that always gets me is that, usually when you're searching for a job, you're at one of the lowest points in your life. You're like your self-esteem, your self-confidence is at its like all-time lowest because you're between jobs, right? Maybe you were let go, or maybe you were laid off, or whatever happened, right? And then having to go sort of cap in hand to a bunch of arrogant people in a confusing process. You don't really understand what's going on or what the reality is, and then you have to try and appear confident, at the same time. It's pretty damn hard, and it's pretty stressful, and it's just a kick in the gut, for a lot of people. And I remember that feeling quite a lot. And that's why one of the reasons why I do this channel is because I had some pretty traumatic experiences back when I was younger and I was between jobs and stuff. And I remember, and I personally encountered a lot of really stuck up, arrogant recruiters that were also incompetent, but yet just condescending, just nasty people that didn't care about you or anything. And, certainly didn't have any sympathy or sensitivity for your situation. You know what I mean? And I remember thinking, like, how are these people like put in charge of this? Because they're terrible at it, And then years later, I worked with recruiters, and I got sort of a little bit more of the puzzle, But no, I mean, my heart goes out to a lot of people, young people that are in this, especially these days. I mean, it's a real, it's very unfortunate, So if that's you, you're not alone. And the other thing is that this process, it is temporary. It really is temporary. It doesn't feel like it's temporary, but it is. So just kind of, you're doing the right thing. You're trying to get help. You're trying to get assistance, and that's good, that will help to correct any issues you might have. Do all you can to learn as much as possible about this process. Once again, I would check out the hidden job market. I honestly would. That's where everything is. The posted job market, it's like, you get 80% of the candidates competing for those 20% of the jobs that are posted. It's pretty competitive, and there's all kinds of shenanigans going on in the posted job market, like with fake jobs and all this kind of stuff. So, it's just this weird thing. So learn all you can. And, like I've done so many videos about every job interview question and like how all this stuff works behind the scenes. And I know that I'm, like my videos are probably not like super entertaining to watch, most of them, but in quite a few of them, I do give away some pearls, it's, like for example, I put out a video, was it last week, about how to answer the question, what is your current salary? And then that got quite a lot of views, but like I got about 100 comments all saying the same thing, which is like, yeah, but what if they ask that on a form? It's like, yeah, I know that, but this is a video. This is how to respond in an interview. I have done a separate video on how to answer that on a form, but nobody watched that video, so, and YouTube doesn't promote it. So it's like hard for me to get the word out about those things, Anyway, get in the chat. I'm just sitting here waiting for questions. So if there's something you're wondering, I might have to revert to talking about, tell me about yourself. I'm going to say anything. I know at least one person wanted me to do that. Oh, I forgot to do the shout out to my YouTube channel members and to my Patreons and my super thanks donors. By the way, if you send a super chat, I will answer your question fully and completely, and I will ignore the time constraints and anything else. And of course to you guys, thank you for being here. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. I see there's 43 people here. Yes. And I will be back in 40 minutes with another live stream. Maybe we'll wind this down if I don't get any more questions. Where we talk more about, I do a live stream called Honest HR Nitrous. That's where we talk about like the gritty reality of how this stuff works in the real world. Not the theory behind it, but what we actually see going on, kind of behind the scenes, complete with fake jobs and idiot recruiters and ghosting and all that kind of stuff, you know. That's where we talk about that. So I've got an episode of that coming up in about 40 minutes. So there we go. Jay Lopez says, love your channel. Well, thank you, Jay Lopez. Is that like J-Lo for short? J-Lo. Didn't her butt get really big or something for like, you know, there's a period there where that's what people were saying. I don't know. I'm not in tune with pop culture. And then that was like 25 years ago or something. So it's probably, people probably don't have a clue what I'm talking about, but that's okay. Okay, well, I think we've kind of hit the end of the chat here. There's not really any questions coming in. So I'm going to wind this down. I will be back in just over half an hour on this channel with another live stream. And we will talk about the gritty reality of job search then. Thanks for being here. I wish you guys nothing but the best. Remember, you're awesome. And learn all you can about this world. It's to your benefit. The more you know, the further you'll go, the more successful you'll be. Okay, take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.